We've got an episode for you that I think you're going to love, especially if you're looking to turn on your creativity big time. I've been working for many, many years in helping people and myself draw forth their deepest creativity. And it's an exquisite thing to learn how to do. Also in this episode, one of the things you'll learn is some very practical things, like I share a process of what I do if I get stuck, how I deal with it using my own natural body resources. And it's all about really learning how to feel good all the time and learning how to use your body as a dashboard that tells you exactly what's going on in your life.
Oh, I love this. And we also talked about, this is a big distinction that Gay has. It's your zone of genius versus your zone of excellence and how to push yourself in there. We've got a really practical tool. It's a mechanism that I only do with my $35,000, what I call Superpower Accelerator Vision Days, on how I activate our energy and get in sync so we create together. And it's a never fail process. Also, one of the things that Gay talks about that really had a massive impact on me is this notion of your emotional dashboard, thinking about how to read your body in ways you may have never done before. And it is a superpower visualization. It's something you're going to be able to start using today. And then we end the episode with some powerful questions that you can use that I think are going to elevate your relationships with people you care about and how you elevate anyone you come in contact with. All that and more, Gay. This is really, I think so far it's our best episode to date.
I agree. I had a blast.
All right. Well, all that and more coming up in episode 8.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Big Leap Podcast. This is Gay Hendricks here with my good buddy, Mike Koenigs.
All right. And we are going to be talking today about how to pull out your inner genius. This is episode 8. So I've got a whole system and a whole process I use both with clients when I do Vision Day or I work with them. And I'm super curious how you do the same thing, either when it's with yourself or you and Katie or the clients you work with. So how do you want to go about doing this?
Well, I really am glad we're talking about this, because if there's one thing people really need to be doing right now, it's how to open up and let more of their true creativity emerge. I think there's a difference. I make a distinction between ordinary creativity, where you're using your creative skills to do things for other people, and true creativity, where you're using your skills to do things for other people and that also benefit yourself. So that the ones that are really useful to you are ones that don't diminish you in the act of producing them. You know, a lot of people get stuck in what I call in the Big Leap, the zone of excellence, where they're doing stuff they're good at, but they're not drawing on their genius. And so one thing that I've spent a good bit of my career doing is, how do I actually create the space that invites forth genius? And I think visioning is good and that kind of thing, but I always start by getting underneath it. Like when I'm going to work with somebody who maybe somebody's coming in for one of our 10K days, which could be a couple, or it could be the head of some organization, or it could be somebody from the business world or a show business person. I spend a lot of my time beforehand creating a space inside myself for connecting with that person. So I know they're coming. They may be coming 2 weeks from now, but I start 2 weeks earlier, actually kind of laying down the space in myself to connect with that person. And the reason I do that is because I think that a lot of the ways you can connect with people are almost better to do when they're not right there. You know, you want to kind of go in by knowing something about what their journey is and making a space for that in your own being, and dedicating yourself to serving them.
Yes.
That's incredibly important. So laying the groundwork, I want to put in a big plug for that, in addition to all the practical things you might do with visioning.
Okay, good. And I will tell you that I have a process, and you just going through that and creating the context, I will give you a divider of when I'm serving someone else in real time or I'm preparing to serve someone, because there is a a strong delineation on how I prepare my brain versus I prepare them and me in concert with one another, because I think alignment is hugely valuable here. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to describe what I call the Superpower Accelerator process. And this is both a series of questions that I ask someone before we begin a day or two that we're working together, and also the day of. Because for me, the preparation has to do with getting inside their mind and their head and really understanding their values and their outcomes and being able to rest with that. And also answering that very important question, which is, who do you want to be a hero to? That's it's a full credit where credit is due. That's a Dan Sullivan-ism. But in another format, you'd say, who's your avatar? Who is it that you are creating content for? But being a hero to someone, I think energetically is a clear distinction. I know I've processed that in a different way. So here's the process that we do. One of them, again, is something I've borrowed from a strategic coach, which is positive focus. Whenever you have dinner with Dan, for example, or the way I do meetings is we start up and ask, tell me something that you're absolutely excited about right now that's happening in your life or has maybe happened in the past week. The whole idea is bringing in that positive focus. It changes and shifts the energy and we get alignment, which is super important. And then I do a grounding exercise. So if I'm at the beach, for example, with a client, we walk out and stand outside on the terrace, and I say, first of all, take a big deep breath in and smell that ocean air and that creativity, and then look at this infinite ocean and realize that it wants you to have anything you desire, and everything you can imagine is inside it. Every substance, there's an infinite supply of possibility and potential, many lifetimes worth. And we live in this amazing ecosystem. And for all the crazy fear mongering that goes on inside the media, in the grand scheme of things, it's irrelevant. Okay. So you got to separate all this black that's out in the world that's created by, we don't even need to go down that path. It's staying in that positive space. And then imagine sending energy down to the core of the earth through your feet and root yourself to the center of the earth and feel that power and that heat and that energy there, and allow that to go up to you and create a circulation system of power and energy and stability. And then I ask them to take a big deep breath, experience all this abundance, and tell me, what are the one or two emotions or feelings you want to feel right now, by the end of the day, and all the time? And I ask them to think about that for a little while, and everyone comes up with one or two. And then we go inside and write those down, and I plaster it on the wall right away. So I've got these big 3M sticky pads, and that way you've got your feeling and your emotion. And whenever we do an exercise or an experience, I say, where are you? Let's rate how you feel right now on a scale of 1 to 10. And I'm looking for 10s all day long, and make sure we stay there. And then this is the getting to know you part. So it's, again, who do you want to be a hero to? How do you want to show up? And again, that if you inhabit that body in that energetic state and remain in that, it puts you in a place of power because you're in a state of service, which I think is really, really important. It keeps you responsible, respectful, and aligned for, again, being on purpose and being purposeful. And then I imagine I have them answer another important question, which is, if you could describe, and whatever the outcome of the day happens to be, usually it's around branding, but I want you to imagine yourself having a platform, whether it's a book or a TED Talk or your signature speech or your product or how you want the world to see you. Describe that to me right now. And I try to evoke as many emotions as I can, so you get anchored into actually experiencing that in a future-paced fashion. And without exception, that gets the individual fully aligned in a space where we can co-create extremely rapidly. And from there, it's just a matter of channeling that stuff, documenting it, and then being able to put it in an organizational flow where at the end, it's sort of like, we just finished something that I've been trying to get done for 3 years or 5 years or 10 years or longer. And that sense of accomplishment, it's profound. And usually what I do at the end is some sort of an anchoring experience or exercise to make it come true. So what I started doing that's been profound is I bring them into this studio where we're in right now, and I do a future-paced interview based upon the new future we created together as an article. And usually there's an offer in it, and then that gets turned into an entrepreneur.com article. So you are living in this new space, and from that moment forward, they can go out and start having conversations with their clients or customers or whoever it is they want to have an audience with, and they're already inhabiting that space. And because we made it come true and it's public, they're in that space when we're having the conversation. And in a previous episode, we talked about the importance of theater and creativity. When you act as if, your brain can't tell how much time has passed. It is an illusion. And when you're anchored in this energetic space, there is no distinction. You can become a brand new person in hours or days. And so that's the process. And I'm curious what your perspective is.
Yeah, I really love it. It reminded me of one thing that we always do as far as future goes. I ask people to go out into an imaginary future a year from now and look back at where they are now and ask themselves, what will it take to get to this other place? And sometimes the act of simply shifting them out of the present and looking back at where they are now is enough to kind of pop loose the creativity. Because I think our creativity is sitting there kind of waiting to be invited.
Yeah.
It's, in fact, one of my mentors, Jack Downing, who was a psychiatrist that I did some training with when I was at Stanford, he said that the very best thing you could do for generating ideas in yourself is to find something to do that's not what you normally do. And I asked him, what do you mean? And he said, well, for example, instead of trying to solve a problem sometime, go home and turn on loud music and just move with it. Don't try to think about it, but move with it. And I didn't know at the time that there was a whole field called dance movement therapy.
Yeah.
But I got so into that I joined a group where we just basically did that. It was a group of professionals who did what was then called dance movement therapy, where instead of trying to solve problems with thought strategies, we would move with them. And it was so incredibly powerful because sometimes with even 10 minutes of being outside your normal thinking mode, suddenly a whole bunch of ideas start coming through. Yeah. To this day, by the way, if I get stuck on something, the first thing I do is turn on some music and usually lie down on the floor and just breathe for a little while. Because once I can get my breathing straightened out and get things moving again, flowing, then I'm ready to face life again. But sometimes you get stuck and need to just kind of take a little time out to get the flow going again.
Yeah, that's super powerful. I think what I've found and I told you this in a previous episode, I love to be kinesthetic. So I find that when I'm in performance mode in front of a muse, and can stand and write, sometimes I just change the way I'm pulling stuff out of me. So if you look at the door, for example, you see I've got one of these 3M, they're the 20 by 25 inch sticky, they're like Post-its, but they're the giant ones. I've got stand-up boards at the house and at the beach, and I've got an eternal supply, cases of markers. Yeah. Okay, so I never run out, and I've always got cases of pages because I found that if I have a problem, I stand and I perform my way out of it, because I know that if I were placed in a position And the theoretical statement, which might not sound super attractive, is if you had a gun pointed at your head, you had 10 minutes to live, and you had to solve a problem, I guarantee you'd figured it out. So I don't put myself in a panic state, but I do put myself in an empowering state with a deadline that's super short. And I've found if I can stand, and if I had to teach my way out of the circumstance, I could certainly stand, and I wouldn't want to disappoint the audience, and I also wouldn't want to be the fool. So something will come out of me that'll be useful, and to at least start that process, even if it's jibber jab. And I don't remember who it was years ago. It was a famous copywriter, and he said the way to start writing is to just go through the motions of writing and just start writing, drawing blah, 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 blah on a yellow pad. And as long as you get in that state of serving and having an intention, pretty soon your brain will get into that space. So that's the kinesthetic mechanism.
I really like that, because if you think about it, the part of the mind that involves logic and language is about the size of a 50-cent piece. And the rest of us is immense.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So inside, from a big leap perspective or a conscious luck perspective, what are some of the resources and tools in there for pulling out your inner genius? What are some of the techniques that you've used with your highest level clients over the years to activate that center and get them in that right fit space? And can you think of any stories of some people that you've been able to motivate or shift their beingness so they had a profound leap as a result?
Yes. One example, I already touched on having people go into a room for 10 minutes and be by themselves, basically. We have a graded series of these 10-minute experiences that people go through. One of them is to go sit by yourself for 10 minutes and close your eyes and just do one thing for the whole 10 minutes. And that is, about every 15 seconds, ask yourself a wonder question. And the one we start with is, what is my true genius? What is my true genius? And we ask them, we coach them very carefully on how to make that wonder hum, because it has to be absolutely sincere. A real wonder question is something you really don't know the answer to, but you'd really like to know the answer to. And so we invite people to go in and just sit in these wonder questions for 10 minutes at a time. 10 minutes, by the way, is all it takes. It doesn't help if they sit there and do it for 45 minutes. Everybody has a breakthrough within 10 minutes. And then we have a set of other questions, like one might be, how much on a daily basis how many hours every day do I spend on my creativity? And most people come out of that one very depressed, because they realize they're spending almost no time on their creative, even though they may be one of the most creative people in their field. Because like with Vivian, she set up this foundation out of a heart experience, and then it got so complicated that it took more and more head to try to keep up with it, and pretty soon you're not developing the side of it that speaks to your heart. And that's where a lot of people get burnt out.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's when the monster that you think is important and starts swallowing you, or someone else's agenda does that. I know one thing that I really admire about you, and I've observed many times, is when you're done with something, you just get up and you're like, yep, I'm over it. You are very, very conscious of when your body and your mind are done. And I can tell that you manage based upon your feelings. And one of the first times I observed that, I was like, well, that was kind of rude. He just got up and left. And it was just, I thought, well, what's going on with Gay? And we had a conversation about it. And I don't remember the order of events. And you just explained to me, one of your goals is to feel good all the time. And that is, why don't you talk a little bit about feeling good all the time and how that drives your decision-making, your creativity, and staying inside your genius and allowing you to say no?
Yeah, really super important. And I want to make it clear that I wasn't always good at this. This is something I trained up really over the years. Yeah. But I think that body awareness is your best friend because your body has been in business for millions of years. Your ego has been in business for a couple of 100,000 years. But your body has been making adaptations and doing things like learning how to do those 300 things that your liver needs every minute, and learning how to make an autonomic nervous system different from a central nervous system, and all of those genius things that the body has been doing. Mm-hmm. But it's only been recently that we've more recently developed language and developed this thing called the ego and strive for success and that kind of thing. So those are very new things. So the main thing I want people to do is learn how to use their body as an information source, which will tell them when it's saying yes, when it's saying no, when you ought to go ahead, when you ought to wait. It's there with the information all the time. But what happens is society bashes that out of us and instills an externally focused awareness on us that, you know, puts people out of touch with what's going on inside. So I've spent, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars getting my body awareness. You know, I've been Rolfed 100 times over 30 years. I've done hundreds of hours of Feldenkrais training with body awareness, and I meditate every day. So I'm kind of a fanatic on the subject of creating more conversation with our natural energy system in there, because it's a genius. It got us out of the water and we learned how to walk. And then it got us out onto planting things in the ground and watching them grow, you know. And so we've got to consider the genius of ourselves at every moment and use that as a barometer of whether we're doing the right thing or not. And so John Belushi was also incredibly helpful in that. Not many people know this about John, but he also had a cosmic streak. He had some nasty drug problems, but that did him in at an early age, but he was a pretty cosmic dude. And one thing he said, which always stuck in my mind, someone asked him once, what is the great benefit really of being a success? Because John was another one of those guys that he didn't have 15 houses. He didn't care. You know, he didn't have 10 cars. But what his emphasis was on the creativity. And his phrase that stuck in my mind was, the only tangible benefit of fame is that you can get up and leave whenever you want. And so I stuck that in the back of my mind. You know, that's a very fascinating thing, that after everything he's gone to, it's that act of being able to get up when he doesn't want to be someplace. And now, you can do that from a place of ego. Maybe he did it from a place of ego, but I'm suggesting that people do it from a place of sensitivity, so that they're sensitive to what their body needs and wants in any moment. And that, to me, is one of the greatest conversations that I could have ever engaged in, because it gives you a real life connection with the universe at every moment.
Mm-hmm. And if you look back for a moment at all of the systems that you've modeled, experienced, what do you think got you the furthest, fastest? So if you think about Rolfing, Feldenkrais, and for anyone who's not familiar with that process, it is a very, very subtle, nuanced series of exercises. It's not massage, it's not network chiropractic, it's not chiropractic, but it's this very light touch, subtle movement that activates your nervous system and also releases trauma and stress. It's profound. I've done it a few times, probably 4 times, and I was really, really moved by it. You know, so that was very interesting. And I've done, you know, everything from like float tank therapy, lots and lots of energetic chiro. One of my good friends, John Amaral, he was just featured by on the Goop special. He's this energetic network chiropractic guy he travels with Tony Robbins, for example. He's very sensitive and does very subtle energetic work. But all of these have been useful, but I haven't used them in the same way you have, where I've kind of compiled a dictionary or an encyclopedia of activators. Mm-hmm. So what, first of all, do you think would be most powerful? And then how have you managed to sort and organize that in a way that you can activate it whenever you want to or need to?
I think that beyond any technique, like I've really loved the Feldenkrais work, and I I hated some of being roughed because it was painful, but I liked the result of it. It helped clear a lot of old trauma out of my body. But I think more than any other technique, it's a willingness to explore and experiment. I've learned more just lying on the floor, breathing and wondering than I did in any kind of session I ever did with anyone. Because I think that what people need is that direct communication with the creative force in the universe. If Rolfing can help clear the space for that, great. It did for me. I've done everything. I've done, I don't know how many different forms of massage and meditations and all that kind of thing. It ultimately finding a tool that opens up more of a connection with the universe itself. And as we enter the universe of our bodies, that has an incredible amount of information that we're not using. It'll tell you whether you really ought to say yes or no. I look back at relationships I've been in that were painful. In every situation, I always got a body cue beforehand that I was on the wrong path, but I overrode that.
Yeah.
I said, well, maybe I'm having this negative reaction now, but maybe if I married her, everything would be different. Maybe I stay up all night crying and screaming and having arguments with her now, but maybe if we got married, that would make things better. That was a mistake I made when I was about 23. I think that lasted a couple of years, and I didn't make that one again after that.
Yeah, they call that the starter marriage.
And God bless her. Also, I want to give a shout out to Gwyneth Paltrow, who was kind enough to interview us on Goop, our relationship work, and I'll always be grateful to that, to her and Oprah and other people like that who get the word out to large numbers of people. And I know she takes a lot of heat, Gwyneth does, for stuff she does, but I want to give her a solid appreciation.
Oh, that's great. Well, it turns out it was actually Gwyneth Paltrow who interviewed John Amaral when I was just talking about that, and I forgot Gwyneth's name while I was talking about it just a moment ago. So that interview just hit Netflix, and he blew up overnight. It was crazy, and he's kind of been preparing for this moment for as long as I've known him, which is the better share of probably 10, 12 years. But holy cow, does she have a following, and pretty impressive. How long ago was it that she interviewed you guys?
It was a few years ago.
Okay.
Gosh, probably now 5 years ago, something like that.
Yeah. No,
and I saw the sales charts of Conscious Loving the next day and the Big Leap the next day, and they made an impact for sure.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So I'm going to ask you just to go a little bit deeper on activating the physical parts, and what do you listen in for or feel into, or what's the question that you often ask yourself so you get the right answer? Because sometimes just asking the right question is the most important part of this, so you get an opportunity to listen.
Well, something I use as a question when I hit some kind of problem, or like if I get into a communication glitch with somebody, I will ask myself, of all the possible things I could create in this relationship, why would I have created this particular type of trouble with this person? So I take it on as something I'm responsible for creating, but not to blame for. I'm not blaming myself, but I'm just saying, it's a wonder question. Why did I create this particular drama with this particular person? And that is really a powerful question. Because when you're doing big things in the world, you're going to run into conflicts with people, and you're going to get down alleys that don't have any cheese at the end of them, and you'll find yourself halfway down a cheeseless maze and have to back yourself out of it. But that's the nature of entrepreneuring. And, it's how you deal with the unexpected that makes your great leaps forward. It's when things come out of the blue at you, and then you have to figure out some way to do that. Well, for one thing, I think that let's give a shout out also to sheer terror, because sometimes you're in a terror, you just cannot think of what the heck to do. Yeah. And the absence of any alternative, if you can just sit with that fear for a little while, it opens up a space for something to break through. The mistake that most people make is trying to control and manage their fear. Then it turns into anxiety, some kind of a steady state buzz, an unpleasant steady state buzz. But what happens that the moment you get underneath that buzz and simply ask yourself, what am I afraid of? What is the core fear down here? That gets you a lot of mileage very fast, because the fear has emerged as a response to something, some threat you feel. Or like if you feel angry, there's almost entirely, as a body issue, has to do with the shoulders and the back of your neck and up the spine, the same locations where a dog or a cat has its hackles that rise. That's what tenses up when you're angry. And 9 times out of 10, it's because you've seen something that seems or looks unfair to you, where someone is using a power differential over someone else. And they may be using it on you. That's why you're angry about that. But the question to ask in that, again, is, of all the possible things I could be feeling right now, why would I be feeling that one? And so that's why you've got to get to know your body, because if you know that your anger is about something that you perceive as unfair, and you know that your fear is about something you perceive as a threat, and your sadness, you know, is something you've lost, it's a loss you're experiencing, that gives you a tremendous amount of power to be resilient in situations that often knock people flat.
Right. And that's, again, in all of these cases, it just comes down to being aware. And when I think about a high frequency, highly conscious individual versus low conscious, the first part is being able to detect and know how uncomfortable you are without reacting to it. So it's becoming an observer and realizing that your body is a tool it's like a dashboard of information.
I use exactly that image, by the way.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's cool. I'm glad you're using that image.
Okay.
Your body it'll tell you when your oil pressure is low, when your water is running too high, when you're nearly out of fuel. And you'd be surprised at how many people overlook or override that information.
How interesting. So the distinction then is being able to see the thing you think is you, which is your body, which isn't you. It's the thing that's riding inside it.
Yeah.
And being able to learn how to read all these gauges and create the distinctions for all the layers and levels, which are multidimensional, and in some cases, analog. They're not digital. In other words, there isn't any left, right, on, off. There are variables, and they're interdependent on top of that. So if we were going to, I just want to pursue this rabbit hole for a moment. Just imagine for a second being able to visualize the human dashboard and the relationships and connections and what's emotional, what's spiritual, what's energetic, what's time-based, what's egoic, what's relationship-based. In your mind, just from a historical perspective, who do you think has created the best visual or diagram or description of these in a way that can be understood fastest? Because as I'm thinking about this, I've never thought about it through this lens before. I haven't thought of body as dashboard. And I certainly don't remember seeing someone create a chart, kind of like a chart of elements.
Yeah.
So what do you think of that? And does something like that exist?
They should go to the website of my nonprofit foundation, the Foundation for Conscious Living, because we have a number of diagrams that will actually explain it like that. As a matter of fact, a funny thing happened to me just this past week. Probably every day or two, I get some wonderful message on Twitter or email or something from somebody whose life was changed by the Big Leap. And a fellow sent me the other day on Twitter a private message with this diagram he had made of all the elements of the book that was just brilliant. And I had my assistant write back to him and say, hey, can we just go ahead and publish this out on Facebook and everything? And so the guy said, sure. And so we just put it out there, and it's a marvelous little view of the human body. But so I'd say a good place to look would be in the Big Leap and also in our book, at the speed of life, because that's the one that gets down into the actual technicalities of how it's all put together and everything like that. Let me just say, using this dashboard image, though, I'm loving this because I'm glad to think if you're a dashboard guy, but think of having some indicators on your dashboard. What would be the most important indicators for you to be able to see? What would be the equivalent of your gas gauge and your oil pressure and that kind of thing? Well, let me tell you, one would be one gauge that says, do I want to be here? Do I want to be where I am right now? If that's off, you need to look at, where would I rather be than in the present? And why am I taking myself out of the present? What's here in the present that I haven't faced and dealt with? Okay, so do I want to be here? A second indicator on your dashboard would be your little emotions display, where you really need to know basically fear, anger, and sadness, whether you're in the grip of one of those at the moment. They have a thing in AA that I like. They say HALT, halt. That means when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, be very wary, because those are the times you're likely to reach for a drink instead of handling the direct need. So if you're hungry, a lot of people override that. A lot of people overlook when they're angry, don't realize that they're operating out of anger. A lot of people get to feeling lonely and make some dumb move. And a lot of people,
when they're tired,
they do something to override that rather than just,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I will tell you, so I like alcohol on a limited basis. First of all, I can't have much of it, and it definitely, like, I can't have it multiple days in a row without severe consequences. So I've just never had what I'd consider to be a problem. But honestly, it's my drug of choice. But as I look through this, I've never, ever reached for it with any of those in mind. It's purely because I wanted to have an extrasensory experience of taste, of smell, and it would be a form of communing with another person. So, like, the idea of drinking alone has never been anything I'm interested in or do. It's like an enhancement, but not like, oh, we're going to have more fun. It just adds a different dimension. So that's fascinating that that doesn't register, and it wouldn't be on my dashboard, not like that anyway.
It's big on a lot of people's dashboards. So I'll tell you, that's if you've got addiction problems, that takes up a lot of space on your dashboard. Another thing that needs to be on our dashboards too is our overall energy level. You see, I believe human beings are designed to function at a pretty high level of energy. We're designed to function at high energy, then rest deeply, then come back out and function at high energy, rest deeply. I think what causes people to get depressed is keeping themselves from going fast or really resting. They kind of live in this middle zone there, and that wears people out.
Yeah, it's a form of modulation, an unhealthy modulation. Yes. It's unnatural modulation.
Exactly.
How interesting. Never thought about it through that lens either. That's a very powerful distinction. So so again, mapping this out, and you said the Foundation for Conscious Living.
Yes, Foundation for Conscious Living. Katie and I started it in 1989, and it's been thriving ever since. It does three things, actually. It gives scholarships to people who want to study interesting things. It supports research for people who are doing research into interesting things. And three, it creates, it funds movies and documentaries and things like that for people who are in conversation about subjects like this.
Okay. Well, one thing that I definitely want to explore in greater detail is what's on your dashboard and what's on the universal dashboard. So just imagine having a design your own dashboard. If there was a mechanism where you'd have a questionnaire, so it'd be like a combination of a personality profile and an assessment, and then it would build it. And what I loved about what you just did right now is if you got to pick because this goes beyond emotions.
Yes.
It goes beyond energy, but also it's what are healthy, appropriate questions to ask yourself. It's almost like a rubric. I think that's what it's called. There's a term for it. I know I could discover it fairly quickly, but in the old days, the 60s and 70s, the Russians were well known for creating paper computers. They're logic diagrams. So they wouldn't have computers and spaceships. It would be this diagram. It was kind of like a flow chart.
If this, then this. If that, then this.
And if you imagine this dashboard we're talking about as being one that gets customized and built for you, but asks you these healthy questions to rubric your way out of any kind of a situation, like you just said, do I want to be here and what haven't I faced? Because in a space of discomfort, being able to access and start making these habitual requires some form of a visualization, and this almost lends itself into a healthy AI also. It's a true machine learning model that could be applied for humans too, but also really understanding and exploring this. And maybe, one of our listeners or viewers knows of such a thing that exists where someone has done the decoding. But this is a fascinating, super fascinating and interesting conversation that I want to continue, which is the Genius dashboard.
Genius dashboard. I love it.
Do you? Okay, good. All right. So I'm just making it up on the fly here, but I want to find some way of taking this to a deeper and more powerful level. So as we kind of bring this episode to a close, are there any other thoughts or asks that we might have for our audience, or any other big ideas that go along with activating your emotions, decoding your emotions, and being able to activate your genius as well?
Well, one you just mentioned, which is ask, which is, I think that we can ask our unconscious for exactly what we want. We can ask our ego for what we want. In other words, you could ask that certain things be decreased and certain things be increased.
Yeah.
Like a while back, for example, when we moved to California, we came back out here in 1995. And so I left a whole friendship and professional network back in Colorado, where I'd been for 21 years. And when I came out here, I reassessed, what do I really want to have in terms of relationships? And I came up with this wild idea that what I really wanted was, for my core love relationships, besides my family, I wanted 3 to 5 people whose faces lit up when I walked in the room.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't want 50 of those. I can get that out on a stage where I get a nice big ovation. That's great. I can get 200, 300 people doing that. But what I want around me at all times are those 3 or 4 or 5 people that my face lights up when they walk in the room, and their face lights up when I walk in the room. Those are the kind of people I want to spend time with.
I love that. It reminds me of a short story. I was talking to someone I interviewed not long ago, and it's one of 2 people, so I'm not going to mention their name and so I don't get it wrong. But one of them either was one of the biggest record executives who's ever lived, or I could just say it's Joel Zadak, who manages comedians. And either one of them said something along the lines of, as an executive working with celebrities, when a celebrity walks in the door and you can feel the energy get sucked towards them in a room the moment they walk in and before you see them, and it is a noticeable sensation. And that, for one thing, I'm absolutely fascinated in what that is, because it's something I've definitely detected and felt when you meet one of those charismatic, freaking incredibly, they're like a solar system upon themselves and a sun. And what you're talking about is when you sort of represent that amplification and you find that right frequency resonant thing with another person. It's sort of like when you fall in love and you're activating each other and you feel that everything happen. And to be able to experience that and find, like you say, the 5 people who light up when you walk in, but also the vice versa, and stimulating that to me would be in addition to the big leap experience and the conscious luck experience is when we select the 50 or so that we put in the room, that would be one of my intentions that I want to create, that it's not just that the stars walk in and suck the energy out of the room, it's that we all together amplify the room. And exploring, like, what does that look like? How does that occur? What does it happen? Along with this emotional genius dashboard experience too, and really going deep on understanding how to read that, because I think that's definitely, we're on the right path to building a really high frequency utopia.
Yes, definitely.
All right.
Well, I had the experience back in the 90s. I was at a fundraiser, and it was not long after Titanic came out. And I was at a fundraiser down in Hollywood, and all of a sudden, there was that energy sucked out of the room experience, and I didn't know what it was, but I knew something was different. And I looked over, and Leonardo DiCaprio had just walked in the room. And within about 20 feet, suddenly he had about 40 people around him. You know, it was like thwack. And so how do we turn that on? That's a good question.
Yeah. Those who are, those of us mere mortals. And I will tell you that over the past, I'll say 20 years, I started working around and with celebrities about 30 years ago in some way, shape, or form. And I also work with a lot of what I'll call ordinary folks who want to elevate themselves and build brands. And charisma isn't a teachable skill. It's sort of like you got the it or you don't have the it, or you're willing to explore it and be courageous enough and raw and be naked. And there is a part of that is authenticity. It's like when you see a vocalist who tears their heart open and is willing to do that performance where you're like, holy mother of, you have that wow experience, and like, where does the shining star come from that's so pure and real? And even though it's a repeated act, that star gets torn open, and it's like you're drawn to the nuke. And the one thing about nukes is if you get too close, you get fried a lot of the time. That's one thing about, if you spend a lot of time working with celebrities, oftentimes the ones who are closest to them get nuked. Yep. You get burned. But I do want to spend some time in genius wonderment of activating and exploring that too. So I'm going to put a bookmark in this notion of activating your genius charisma and exploring that conversation with you. And let's gestate that one for a little while. I think that's a very powerful form of alchemy we can do together here. Definitely. And if we could build a charisma amplifier. Oh yeah. Yeah. I think who wouldn't want to plug into that device? So let's land this episode and know that, again, we started with how to pull out your inner genius, and we talked about techniques to activate that part of your body and your heart and also be able to read it. And we went into all sorts of things, which I loved the wonder question. And that's an activator. That's a very powerful, magical activator. And here's a secret about that too. The moment you hum physiologically, your right and left hemisphere are joined together. So humming is a great way to get crosstalk across your corpus callosum between your hemispheres. Oh yeah. It takes both sides of your brain to and wonder about something. Wow. So there's a interesting group. I can't remember who they are right now, but they're a pop group from Mongolia who do Tuvan singing, and they're a hard rock Tuvan singing group. And one thing I practiced for quite some time, in addition to playing the didgeridoo, is Tuvan singing and chording my voice. I can't really do it right now because you've got to really put a lot of time in it. But I think there's a very powerful activator there as well. So let this gestate. I'd like to do a little research and return to the charisma activator. And what did you call it?
I don't remember.
All right. Well, you know what? That's the good thing about doing a little bit of voice recognition, and we'll do transcripts here. But it had to do with a charisma amplifier. That's what it was. All right. Yeah. Good. All right. Well, I think this is a great place to break this. And as usual, ask you, the audience or a viewer, to definitely post your reactions and your responses to this episode. Rate, review, and share this with one or two people you know who can be elevated and can also be maybe one of the 5 people you want to invite into your life and your room who light you up, or you light them up when you walk in.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right. Well, another great episode. Well done, my friend.
Your face lights up when I walk in the room, and my face lights up when you walk in the room.
I know. We found each other. 2 fellow aliens. We found each other. Thank God for that. All right.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Yeah.